Hello, my kako, and mahalo for having me here for your 31st annual Hawaii Tropical Fruit Growers Conference. I hope you and your ohana are well, and especially during these crazy times we're living in, and hope you all had a safe and enjoyable summer. As some of you know, our legislative session begins each year on the third Wednesday of January and ends the first week in May. Next year's legislative session will begin on January 19th. This past session was my 5th year as the chair of the Senate Agriculture and Environment Committee, or commonly known as the AEN Committee. And for the 2021 legislative session, there were 162 bills that Senate leadership referred to my AEN committee, of which one very important resolution and 23 ag and environment bills passed and became law. So with that, let's get to it, the legislative wrap-up. And oh, by the way, for those who don't know, if you want more details on any of the bills, please check out the capital.hawaii.gov website, where you can punch in the bill or resolution number, and it'll give you all the information, committee referrals, who introduced it, hearing dates and times, testimonies, committee reports, etc. So I encourage you to follow, track, and support those bills that you're interested in. It's kind of fun seeing the twists and turns in the legislative process. So let's begin. Climate Energy SCR, or Senate Concurrent Resolution 44. This reso was requested by Dave and Sherry Molnix of 350.org, and it passed with flying colors. While about 2,000 jurisdictions in 34 countries have declared climate emergencies, Hawaii became the first state in the US to do so. SCR 44 acknowledges that there is a climate emergency threatening humanity and the natural world, and commits the state to statewide action that is rooted in equity, self-determination, culture, tradition, and the belief that people locally and around the world have the right to clean, healthy, and adequate air, water, land, food, education, and shelter. The legislature has made a strong statement by declaring a climate emergency and requesting for statewide collaboration to pursue climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. Okay, and so for the bills that passed into law, they're in alphabetical order. I'll start with the nickname that we gave the bill, and then the bill number, and then the act number that's given once it becomes a law. Also, the bills that you see that are highlighted are the ones that I was one of the primary introducers of. So Ag Buildings Expansion, SB 489, Act 100. This law expands the allowable size of ag shade cloth, cold frame, and greenhouse structures from 20,000 square feet to 60,000 square feet, allowing farmers to benefit from economies of scale and to expand their produce production. Ag Loans, SB 336, Act 136. Let me see. Essentially, this law streamlines the process for smaller ag loans, especially important in these hard economic times. Right now, ag loans of $25,000 or more have to have the Board of Agriculture's approval. So this law increases that threshold to $50,000, and it allows loans up to that amount to be approved by the Director of Ag without the Board of Ag's input. Aluminum cans, SB 348, Act 161. This law repeals the requirement that non-carbonated bottled water be bottled in or through lines or equipment through which only water is passed. We're the only state in the country that had this law in place. And we're told that this will save companies like Ball Corporation and Maui Breweries $3 to $5 million. Balloons, HB 1102, Act 141. I know when you think of balloons, you're usually thinking of celebrations like birthdays and graduations. And the problem is, while they're great decorations, when they're released, the balloons inflated with lighter than air gases, it poses a danger and nuisance to the environment, particularly to wildlife and marine animals. So this law bans the intentional release of balloons inflated with lighter than air gases like helium, nitrogen, etc. Exemptions would be for a balloon released for research or meteorological purposes, a hot air balloon that's covered after launching, and a balloon that's released and remains indoors. Beach Restoration, SB 367, Act 162. This law waives the federal Section 401 water quality certification requirement for beach restoration and management projects, that have received a notice of authorization to proceed from the Department of Land and Natural Resources small-scale beach restoration program. DLNR will issue permits for up to 5 years for these beach restorations. Coffee berry borer, SB 855, Act 138. Coffee remains our top ag commodity, only behind seed crops, but as you well know, there are several invasive species like coffee berry borers and coffee leaf rust that are wreaking havoc on our coffee farms. So this law expands the pesticide subsidy program to allow reimbursements to growers for the purchase of biopesticides and fungicides to be used against coffee berry borer and coffee leaf rust. Cruelty-free cosmetics, SB 345, Act 160. Today, more than 30 countries have banned cosmetic animal testing. This law prohibits manufacturers from selling cosmetic products in the state that are tested on animals beginning January 1st, 2022. Dog tether, HB 416, Act 182. This law says that no dog under the age of 6 months shall be tethered or restrained unless the dog is engaged in an activity that's supervised by its owner or an agent of its owner. Cruelty to animals in the second degree is a misdemeanor, but if the offense involves 10 or more pets in any one instance, then it's a Class C felony. The law also allows the court to order attendance at educational classes concerning animal abuse prevention as an additional penalty. Farm to School, HB 767, Act 175. This law would move the Hawaii Farm to School program from Department of Ag to the Department of Education. Food donation, SB 244, Act 159. This law allows the donation of expired food when the donor makes a good faith judgment that the food is unspoiled. HDOA, Department of Ag, and Department of Health Non-Ag Lands Task Force, HB 469, Act 139. In 2003, Act 90 was passed to transfer certain non-ag parklands from DLNR to the Department of Ag. So far, about 19,000 acres of these lands have been transferred from DLNR to DOA, but that only represents 15% of the total. So this law originally would have established a mechanism for the transfer of those certain non-ag parklands from DLNR to Department of Ag per Act 90. In conference committee, we deleted the contents of the bill and established a working group to work out the details. We've been trying to solve this issue since 2003, so hopefully it'll get done this next session. Hydrogen fuel, SB 934, Act 134. Act 135, excuse me. This law exempts hydrogen fuel from petroleum product measurement standards. It's needed because currently there's no means for the state to measure and certify a hydrogen dispenser. Made in Hawaii, SB 263, Act 002. This law renames the Made in Hawaii with Aloha program to Hawaii Made program. It transfers oversight and administration responsibilities for the Hawaii Made program from Department of Ag to DBED. It also places the Grown in Hawaii program under the management of Department of Ag. Establishes the Environmental Advisory Council for the Office of Environmental Quality Control and Office of Planning. That's HB 1318, Act 152. This law transfers OEQC's functions and duties from Department of Health to Office of Planning, and it establishes the Environmental Council as the Environmental Advisory Council and also attaches it to the Office of Planning. Restrictions Ag Use, SB 186, Act 94. This law clarifies that renewed contracts restricting ag uses and activities within ag lands are considered new contracts and are therefore voidable subject to limited circumstances. Sea level rise adaptation, HB 243, Act 178. This law directs the Office of Planning to coordinate the work of state agencies to address sea level rise impacts in relation to state facilities. It also clarifies that the Office of Planning take a lead role in climate change and sea level rise adaptation. Shark protection, HB 553, Act 051. Hopefully, none of you are shark fin soup connoisseurs. You know, it was 11 years ago when Hawaii passed a landmark law prohibiting the finning of sharks and the sale of shark fins and fin products, a cruel practice that drives the massive scale killing of these important apex predators. Unfortunately, that law did not extend to protecting whole sharks from commercial exploitation or intentional killing. I personally introduced this bill 5 years in a row, starting in 2017, but those versions did not pass. So this law prohibits knowingly capturing or entangling any shark, whether alive or dead, or killing any shark within state marine waters. The fines would be $500 for a first offense, $2,000 for a second offense, and $10,000 for a third offense. And there's no penalty for accidental catch and release of sharks. And also shark research will continue. SNAP, SB 512, Act 177. In 2019, Act 153 passed, which created the Hawaii Healthy Food Incentive Program, also known as the Double Up Food Bucks Program. It's run by Department of Ag. The program provides a dollar-for-dollar match to SNAP or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program beneficiaries who purchase locally grown fruits and veggies at participating farmers markets, grocery stores, and community-supported ag projects. So this law, it gets rid of the $10 per visit per day cap and allows the purchase of healthy proteins under the Double Up Food Bucks program. Spittlebugs, HB 237, Act 137. The two-line spittlebug is an invasive species, and it's a big threat to the health and vitality of our pasture lands. Our ranchers are especially impacted by this invasive species. In 2016, the state's first two-line spittlebug infestation was discovered in Kailua Kona, where the pest had damaged almost 2,000 acres of pasture land. So this law appropriates $350,000 in both fiscal years 21 and 22 to the Department of Ag to mitigate and control the two-line spittlebug. Sportfish, SB 1313, Act 223. For those who enjoy fishing, this law directs DLNR to establish a pilot program to restock northern largemouth bass and butterfly peacock bass in the Wahiwa public fishing area and apply for a permit to import them. State Department Produce Goals, HB 817, Act 176. As far as trying to encourage buying and eating local, this law requires state departments to ensure that a certain percentage of produce purchased is locally grown, which ensures the continued growth of local produce. It supports local farmers and ranchers, and it also ensures that revenue derived from the produce of contracts for locally grown produce remains in the state. And so here are the percentage requirements, and these are for January 1st for each of the years. So January 1st, 2025, 10%, 2030, 18%, 2035, 26%, 2040, 34%, 2045, 42%, and January 1st, 2050, 50%. So each state department would need to submit a report to the legislature before each session on the progress toward meeting those benchmarks. Subdivision and CPR Ag Lands, HB 247, Act 077. This law deals with the growing problem of fake farms across the state, which take up ag lands for gentlemen and estates. Surplus military land, HB 1352, Act 93. Federal ownership of lands in our state has resulted in contamination to the water and soil on and adjacent to many of these properties, or created hazards from the presence of unexploded ordnance. So the purpose of this law is to gather data on federally leased and controlled lands, the condition of the lands, and potential alternative uses of these lands should they be returned to the state. And so the law requires Office of Planning to submit a report to the legislature before the 2022 session. And then animal sex abuse, SB 343, Act 31. And although this bill did not come through my AEN committee, it's a bill that I introduced at the request of various organizations. It relates to animals, and it had unanimous support in both the House and the Senate. and you didn't see too much media coverage of this bill for obvious reasons. So bestiality is banned in 47 states. So it was time for Hawaii to become the 48th state. There's actually a strong link between animal sex abuse and child sex abuse. A study of more than 44,000 adult male sex offenders concluded that the sex assault of an animal is the strongest predictor of the sex assault of a child. Some studies have also drawn connections between the sex assault of animals and serial homicide. So by getting SB 343 signed into law as Act 31, we'll better protect both animals and those most vulnerable, our keiki. So those were the AEN bills and rezos, and one non-AEN bill that passed into law in 2021. And now, as I mentioned before, there were 162 bills that were referred to the AEN committee, of which 23 passed that I just went through. So that leaves us with a bunch that didn't pass. And I know that you're just sitting there on the edge of your seats waiting for me to go over each one with an analysis of why each bill failed. Okay, so I'm good. Let's do it. No, just kidding. We would be here until tomorrow, at least midnight, if I did that. But what I'll do is highlight a few of the bills that did not pass. And we'll see what happens next session. If you have others that I don't mention, please let me know so I can consider adding those to my to-do list. First up, Ag Imports Task Force, SB 496. This bill would establish an Ag Import Replacement Task Force to identify the top 10 fruit and veggie imports to the state that can be commercially grown by farmers in the state. The bill would also establish an Ag Import Replacement Tax Credit. Crimes on Ag Lands, SB 219. This one gets me going here. Calm down here. In April 2020, USDA published a report indicating that ag theft and crime cost Hawaii farm producers $14.4 million, or 10% of the 2018 Hawaii net farm income of $142 million. Now, according to the report, nearly 4,000 incidents of theft, 1,112 incidents of vandalism, and 14,262 trespassing incidents occurred during 2019. This bill would impose extended prison terms for offenses committed on ag lands. The maximum length of time for the extended prison sentences would be 20 years for a Class B felony, 10 years for a Class C felony, 2 years for a misdemeanor, and 60 days for a petty misdemeanor. I mean, to me, this is a no-brainer. I'm embarrassed that we have not passed this law yet. And by the way, I would consider amending the bill to include the death penalty. Just kidding, but just barely. The bill made it to conference committee. It's definitely a priority for me next session. So let's all work together and get it passed. Let's get it done. Cover crops, SB 337. This bill would set up a 3-year crop reimbursement pilot program under Department of Ag to reimburse farming operations in the state for the costs of acquiring cover crop seeds or green manure. Food hubs, SB 338. This bill would establish a 5-year food hub pilot program under Department of Ag and allow the awarding of grant funding to qualified applicants for the construction of critical infrastructure to establish and expand food hubs in each of the counties. Food manufacturing development, SB 497. This bill would establish an income tax credit to incentivize the development of the food manufacturing industry in the state. Green Amendment, SB 502. The bill would amend the state constitution's Bill of Rights so that each person has a right to a clean and healthy environment, including pure water, clean air, healthy ecosystems, and a stable climate, and to the preservation of the natural, cultural, and healthful qualities of the environment. It passed the Senate last year, held up in the House, so this will be one of my top priorities for next session. Solar on ag lands, SB 942. This bill would change the law to make it so that a solar developer has to have viable ag operations on the entire area of a solar project. Sunscreens, SB 132. This bill would ban the sale of sunscreens that contain avobenzone, or octocrylene, starting in January 1st, 2023. Taro tax, SB 341. This bill would exempt a person engaged in the business of taro cultivation and production of value-added taro products from business income tax. So that's it. With that, mahalo for allowing me to speak about AEN legislation from the 2021 legislative session. I applaud each and every one of you for all you do, and I look forward to working collaboratively with you for an even more successful upcoming legislative session. Mahalo and aloha, and I'll leave you with this. Mahalo to the Hawaii tropical fruit growers for all you do for Hawaii. Your citrus, abos, papaya, mango, and bananas help keep our minds and bodies healthy. Mahalo.